Okay, everybody. So my name is John O'Donnell, and I'm with the Friends of the Cedarburg Bog. And I'm out here with my good friends Phil, Braden, and Danielle. And we're about to do a circumnavigation of Mud Lake. Mud Lake is the largest lake in Ozaukee County. It's comprised of roughly 250 to 350 acres of water and surrounding cattail marsh. Mud Lake is what could be described as a wilderness lake, meaning that this kind of habitat, this kind of lake, typically is not found in southeastern Wisconsin. In fact, to find a lake like this or to do the type of canoeing and kayaking we're going to do here today, typically we'd have to be hundreds of miles north. So we're here to share with you what Mud Lake is all about, and perhaps even to entice some of you to come out here and sample this urban wilderness setting yourself.
There are different kinds of islands in the Cedarburg Bog. In Mud Lake, we have two large gravel islands, which are islands that once stood up out of the post-glacial lake. They are composed of compacted glacial till and higher ground. The island in the center of the view is called Big Island, and over on the right is Birch Island. Those islands have basswood, maples, and large mature birch trees. They are rich in bird life, with birds nesting among the cattails and reeds or up in the canopy of the hardwood trees. Otters have also been seen using these islands for their dens. And then there are all kinds of islands in Mud Lake that are just places where it's firmer peat, where the vegetation has built up and they are not on gravel. Let's go down to water level to learn more about these muck islands from John O'Donnell.
All right, so this would be considered a muck island?
Yes, there's a muck island right here behind us, and the taller vegetation, those are speckled alders. They need their feet wet, and that's a typical bog tree found more often further north than down here. And we see some cattails and willows and sandhill cranes. There used to be, and maybe still are, but I don't think so. There used to be several pairs of sandhills that would consistently make their nests on these muck islands. And 8-9 years ago, I was monitoring a sandhill nest out here, and everything was going fine. There were 2 colts, and I saw them, and I came back about 3 days later, and they were gone. Just the feathers, yeah, sad. And the lake was lower then, so there was mud, and I could see the tracks of an otter family had killed the colts. And this year we've had a pair of bald eagles move in and reside here. They actually built a nest, but they never, as far as I know, they never got into the egg laying and the incubation. Okay. But they're still here, and they seem bonded together to each other, and they have set this up as their territory. And I think since that has happened, fewer and fewer sandhill cranes are nesting in these muck islands because it's pretty open and it's easy pickings for the eagles. Okay. And we also had a pair of northern harriers nesting here. They've nested here for many years, and they seem to have disappeared when the eagles came in. I suspect they went to another part of the bog. So things are always in a state of flux here. Ecology never stands still. It's always in motion.
You said the water level's high now, so will it go lower this year, or is it more a yearly flux versus a seasonal?
I think it depends on rain. 10% of the water in the Cedarburg Bog is groundwater that comes up. Okay. And the rest of it is, there's a basin here, so it's based on how much rain we get, and the last few years we've had quite a bit of rain. Technically, a bog does not have any outflow. It's a basin, and so where we are right now is it is the Cedarburg Bog, but it's really technically a fen because there is an outflow from the bog, and at a later point I'll show you where the outflow creek is. So it does take a while, and the outflow is just a little creek. It takes a while for water level to go down, and it takes a while for it to go up. And there are places in the Cedarburg Bog that are much more bog than fen. The water doesn't move. In other words, in a bog, the water is not flowing. And in those places, the water is much more acidified, and you'll see a higher density of carnivorous plants, and for example, out in the string bog.
What other birds nest on these mud flats when they're showing or near them?
Yeah, willow flycatchers, they're here now. They're not calling, but there are at least 4 pairs of willow flycatchers that every year each will set up an island as their own personal territory, and there's a set of kingbirds out here on the islands. And of course, marsh wrens are very common here. Probably more marsh wrens here than perhaps any other place in southeastern Wisconsin. Swamp sparrows, and then common yellow-throat warblers and yellow warblers are breeding here, and song sparrows. We can hear a song sparrow singing right behind us. And red-winged blackbirds, of course.
Cool. Lots of diversity in the bog.
Yes. Beautiful. Mud Lake easily has 100 pair of marsh wrens, maybe even 200 pairs of marsh wrens. They thrive in these dense cattails. We have several interesting plants here. These are water lilies, and they have not yet flowered here. There is one flowering lily over there. The flower is encapsulated now. It hasn't opened up, and that's the yellow water lily, or sometimes called the bull lily. And these appear to be bull lilies here. We also have another interesting plant that is yet to, these are bull lilies, although I do see a white lily here also. You'll frequently find them together. They're 2 separate species. And actually, I think they even have they come from a different genus, but they coexist peacefully. These lilies will have a root mass that goes deep down into the muck. Mud Lake it's a muck-bottomed lake, and what we have here is muck. And so what I'm hitting now is not really the bottom of the lake, but my paddle is bouncing off a mass of peat, a peat mass. And that's typical of bogs and bog lakes. In fact, what defines a bog is that the substratum in the bog is a mass of peat, which is partially decayed vegetation that goes back many thousands of years, and as is typical of bog environments. There's low oxygen levels, and so things do not decay quickly. Underneath this peat mass, there probably is more water. So Mud Lake is, as a whole, the deepest portion of Mud Lake is only about 3.5 to 5, maybe 6 feet in a few areas. So big fish don't do too well here in the winter. There are some good-sized fish in here: bass, northern pike, as well as bullheads and bluegills, and then smaller fish called sticklebacks do well in here too. But the bigger fish, if it's a severe winter, they often don't survive to make it to spring because of lack of oxygen if the ice is too thick. These fish come into Mud Lake via an outflow creek that goes into Cedar Creek, and we're going to take a look at that in a little bit. The other plant that I could point out here is pickerel weed, and these will have beautiful purple blossoms in another few weeks. If we're lucky, maybe we'll find a sample, an early blossoming pickerel weed on our circumnavigation of Mud Lake. It's a water shield, and related, of course, to the water lilies, but distant relative. These lily pads float because they have veins that have air in them, and so you can try to sink it and it'll just pop right back up because of the air. The lilies do not open their flowers until mid-morning, and then they close them in mid-afternoon, both the yellow and the white water lilies. And they will also close their flowers up if it's windy, because they don't want to lose their pollen, or if it's raining, because they don't want their pollen to get wet. So, interestingly, these plants have adapted a strategy of being able to preserve their pollen and not lose them based on weather conditions and other conditions, and even disturbance from otters or boats can cause them to close up their flowers to preserve their pollen. When a lily does flower, the flower typically only lasts 3 or 4 days, and then it wilts, and then it's gone. But the plant then sends up other flowers. There's a lot of mythological significance, and some would even say mystical significance, to the flowers of the water lilies. Just like with the lotus, it's a symbol of purity, it's a symbol of beauty, and in the Buddhist tradition, when they do the chant Om Amne Padme Om, one translation of the ancient Sanskrit Om Amne Padme Om is, out of the muck, out of the filth, comes the lotus flower. In other words, beauty comes out of darkness, out of the muck. So, interesting philosophical way of looking at water lilies and lotuses, which are distant relatives. The lotus is found in Asia, not here, although some people purchase lotuses and put them in their ponds here in North America.
Thank you for joining us on our kayaking tour of Mud Lake with John O'Donnell as our guide. We hope you enjoyed learning about the geology and some of the aquatic plants that reside here. Subscribe to our YouTube channel to get notifications of future videos on other inhabitants of Mud Lake.